Welcome to the Potion Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC.
How do you deal with someone if they've never been in for a cocktail and somebody brand new is coming in and they don't really know what they like or anything? Do you have any advice for someone in that situation?
I was going to say mock them openly. The funny thing is that we've had through here, like I have some great memories in this room because this room really, for me, changed the way I saw cocktails. We've had 19-year-old kids come in here for their first legal drink and order a Sazerac. And you're like, well, but you should be at the Strath having like some sort of sugary, sweet, lychee, peachy, crappy thing. I think the thing is understanding like how people have grown up and where their heads at. It's like people say, I don't like gin. I'm like, well, you just had a bad experience with gin. Like you're just having a good gin, like gin in a cocktail, especially a shaken, like served up cocktail, like an aviation, white lady and stuff. The gin is a drying element. It's not a flavor element per se. Like you can still taste the gin, but like if you made it with vodka, it'd be too sweet. It'd be boring. With gin, it gives you complexity and dryness. You don't actually hit this like massive juniper bomb, or you just taste Tanqueray. And like you don't like gin because you had a bad experience. But same thing with tequila, same thing with whiskey, all these sort of things. So again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Is like confidence building and building that confidence up in someone and having them trust you that anything you offer to them is going to be good. And also, as a bartender, you have to have humility in the fact that you may not make a drink that someone likes, and you have to comp it. And you're not going to keep everybody happy. So when people say I don't like gin, can I swap out this product with gin? I'm like, okay, cool. I can do that for you, but how about I just make you a gin version? If you don't like it, I'll comp it. We'll make a vodka cocktail. You'll be happy with it, but just try it. And they're like, okay.
I'm so against people like subbing out items just because they think they don't like it. Like there's a reason why the person making the thing put it in there.
Yes.
And unless there's like a dietary reason that you can't eat something, I'm kind of like, because I used to do this. I used to like, hey, can you take that out of my dish?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, now you're not getting the intended of. It's not what it was intended to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard thing sometimes. Like, oh, I want to modify the dish, but then I don't like the dish when it comes out.
Exactly, and then it leads to a possible bad review.
Yeah. Exactly. And so like for here, we used to do the Clover Club, which was like always the most popular, like entry level, easy, like 2 ounces of gin, raspberry syrup, lemon juice, egg whites, shake it. It's fluffy. It's raspberry. It's gin. And people will be like, oh, I want vodka in it. I'm like, yeah, but if you have vodka in it, it's going to be too sweet. The gin balances out the raspberry. And sometimes I would just keep gin in there. And I would shake it and I'd strain it and I'd send it out. And then a couple of sips in, I'm like, oh, so what do you think? Oh, this is the best drink I've ever had. I was like, just so you know, I made it with gin. And like, oh, I never knew gin could taste like this. And obviously sometimes that backfires and it goes back to that sort of like bullshit bartender ego. But like you sort of sometimes have to push people. It's like a little bird on the ledge. Like it may not want to fly, but then like you push it off the ledge and it'll fly. But I think that's the thing is like you got to find this happy medium of like, oh, you don't like gin cocktails, you don't like what we have on the menu. That's great. Like for us here, we have our house vodka cocktail, which is one of George's, who was a long-time server here, which was just vodka, lychee liqueur, peach liqueur, lemon juice, shaken strained, super simple, flavorful as hell. And for the people you don't want to have a fight with, or like it's a busy night and you're just like, you know what, you like vodka cocktails, I'll make you a great vodka cocktail. So making them something great that they have. But then when it's a quiet night, like you can go, okay, well, let's try this out. And they're like, oh, okay, I dig that. I can feel you on that one. And then they go to aviations, well, last words. And then they start really exploring where gin can take them. Brambles, we have a great bramble variation on the menu right now. And they're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. It's actually been a huge sell, which I wasn't expecting. But so I think it's a cultural, societal thing about how taste change as it goes through. And you just got to play that edge at all times and sort of like push certain people that are willing to get pushed that way over the edge.
Do you have any really cool stories about how a drink came to be? Like a cocktail that you came up with, like a pretty wild story that went into that becoming a thing?
So the Mayoral Flame is a very a very notoriously well-known cocktail here. I think it was made for something close to 5 years after I left. So like off menu, it wasn't on the menu after I left. It was a call cocktail, which is a pleasant surprise. So it's a tequila, a ginger honey shrub, a green tea and serrano chili amaro, and grapefruit juice. And I was exploring shrub. It wasn't really known as shrubs before. Like when I was doing it, it was known as gastriques. So I was exploring gastriques with the chef one night, and it was for a cocktail competition in Vancouver. And so I was playing with ginger honey. I was like, this is perfect. This is great. And I think that actually came out of the reason why it's called Mayo Well Flame is that we did the Homage Cocktail Friday with Mayo Well in New York. It's closed now, but we did a Homage Cocktail Friday. One of their prep ingredients was a ginger honey shrub or ginger honey gastrique. And I was sort of playing around with this ingredient. I'm like, I've still got some of this left, so let's play around with this. I was like, oh, green tea, serrano chili, this is really good. Obviously, tequila works really well because it's Mayo Well, the goddess of agave. Let's throw some grapefruit juice in this shake. And I went over to Vancouver for this cocktail competition, and it was just a gong show. Like the judges were just jokes. Like Solomon came over with me to compete as well, and his cocktail was hot. It was a hot cocktail, and the judges wrote down like, I don't think this cocktail should be hot. It should have used a reposado instead of blanco. And so they weren't judging the cocktail on what the cocktail was. They were judging on how they would do it, which is like
that's problematic.
Which is the biggest faux pas of like cocktail judging. It happens a lot still, but like, and mine was, I remember mine. I was second last. Solomon was last. I was second last, and they didn't like my garnish, so I did a big grapefruit peel over an ice globe. So I transported ice globes from Victoria on the ferry in an ice box for a cocktail competition, and they judged me down. And I did this grapefruit peel that I'd cut into a flame.
Okay.
And sit on the edge. And like, garnish is a joke. Like, these are the sort of comments on the sheet. I'm like, you know what? And it was around the time that I was sort of really trying to push this hypothesis that cocktail competition cocktails weren't doable in bars. Like, a lot of these guys would go like insane, like Jaffard pear, like Poir William has a pear in the bottle. So this guy cracked like 5 bottles to get the pear out and made a puree out of it. I'm like, well, you can't put that on the menu. You're not going to crack 5 bottles of Jaffard Poir William every week to make a cocktail. Like, this is ridiculous. Your cocktail competition cocktail should be able to be put on the menu. And that's just purely from a branding point of view. Like, these brands put up big money for these competitions. They send you to Mexico. They do all this stuff. They expect a little bit of ROI post-competition in your bar doing these cocktails. And I had this sort of hypothesis in my head.
And plus, if you win and it's a drink that you actually can do, then you can say this won this.
Exactly. And a lot of the times you can't.
Yeah.
And so I was like, screw it. I came back and I was like, I'm going to put the Mayo Well Flame on the menu. And it became like a massive seller at Clive's. Like I said, 5 years after I left, to the point that there was still prep for 2019 in the fridge when I came in. Ginger honey shrub. And,
how did that make you feel when you saw that?
Oh, I always love it. Like, a cocktail as complex as that, still being a core cocktail, is like a dream come true.
And off menu.
Like, a core cocktail off menu, still getting made, mental. And so that sort of proved my hypothesis that just because your cocktail doesn't win a cocktail competition doesn't mean it's not good. And judging is so subjective. The same judges will judge the same cocktail differently the very next day based on the food they ate in the morning, the coffee they had, did they have a fight with their girlfriend or the boyfriend at the time, like what sort of mind state are they in? They hung over and have like the taste of cat's ass in their mouth, like all these things. And so the Mayo Well Flame sort of proved my hypothesis that just because a cocktail doesn't win a competition, it actually comes second last out of like 14 competitors, that it's not successful. And it literally made, like, Clive's Drunk Uncle's another one. Drunk Uncle's a very similar cocktail. Like, it's a cocktail I did in 2019. It's a simple Boulevardier Negroni riff, Isla whiskey, China Martini Bianco, grapefruit twist. And I'm like, sweet, this is great. I had it on the menu for a long time. It got put into a Gary Reagan book, which I'm always thankful for Gaz for that. But when I got hired back here to take over, a kid in Sao Paulo in Brazil posted on his Instagram a picture of his drunk uncle, all in Portuguese except for my tag. It said at Shawn Soole. And I'm like, shit. Okay, well, maybe, and this is a drink that's 10 years old. And I'm like, well, drunk uncle's on the menu now. Like, it's come full circle. And like, if the drunk uncle's still getting like representation in Brazil and in Europe, I'm like, okay, maybe I can bring it back on the menu. And it still sells like hotcakes here.
That's incredible.
But nothing like the Mayo Flame. The Mayo Flame is a beast unto itself, to the point that is like...
So basically everyone that comes here should order that.
Once I get the prep redone, I haven't got the prep done. I took it off. It may come back next summer.
Okay.
But like they put 2 cocktails on the menu. One was called the Mayo Killer, which was...
Is that the replacement?
Was supposed to be the replacement, and it still didn't cut it.
Okay.
And so they did the Mayo Killer trying to get rid of this... like the Mayo Flame calls, and
then the Mayo will come back.
And the Mayo came back. So it was insane.
Do you have a favorite aspect of hospitality?
I think it's because every day is different. Like, I know that's a really cliche, cheesy freaking thing to say, but I think the thing is that you wake up every morning, and for me especially, I think you're a little bit the same. As like, you're a hardcore planner. Like, I plan the reason why I can achieve everything is that I plan every 15 minutes of every single, like, my whole day.
I think to sort of grind, like, so when you step back, do you feel like you do a lot of stuff? Or do you feel like you're not doing enough? Like, there should be, you should have room for optimization to do more.
A bit of both.
Okay.
So a bit of both. So the reason why I think a bit of both, because I always want to push myself to do more. Always. Yeah. It's just the nature of my beast. And I don't know, I think it comes from my father. My dad, he couldn't read when he was like 21. So he was in a lot of trouble in high school. He's from London in the UK. So like Skinhead, Doc Martens, the whole shebang. When 16, he was told he was either going to go to jail or the military. Went to the military, killed, I shouldn't say kill, but as a term, because that's a little bit too much. But then when he came, he has a really high IQ, but he couldn't read and write. He bounced through high school, like left, right, and center, juvenile delinquent. My mum taught him how to read and write when he was 21, 22. Ridiculously smart man. Like, you're talking about math or name the 7 C's or do this, like an impressive gentleman. Like, he was just a truck driver. After he got out of the Navy, he was just a truck driver, but he never got he never got any tickets, parking or speeding or nothing. I've seen him spend an hour trying to back up the trailer exactly to the point that he wants it to be. So when he started becoming a business person, what I started working in when I was in high school, it was this constant drive of like, I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would go load a truck full of sod or turf to be delivered that day. I would wash my arms and legs off in the car on like just a bottle of water, get in a school uniform, go to school from 9 a.m. to 3 a.m., hop back in the car, get back into my work clothes, and then go work from 3 till 10. And that was my day in, day out, 7 days a week.
At what age?
From 13 to 17.
Wow.
So it was this constant drive. My dad always said, regardless of what you do, he's like, I don't care if you're a ditch digger, a garbage man, whatever, just be the best you possibly be at it. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of drives me. But my mum always used to say, regardless of how good you are, there's always someone out there better than you. And so
I think those are good. Like, the fact you got both of those pieces of advice are important, but that's great.
It's this sort of polar opposite pulling effect that I always want to be the smartest guy in the room. Mm-hmm. And so I always think that I didn't do enough today, or I didn't do enough. And then I update my resume for any reason, like whether it be to put on LinkedIn or anything. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's only been 7 years since I left Little Jumbo. Well, actually 6 years since I left Little Jumbo, literally to almost the month. I'm like, all the stuff that I've done in 6 years, I'm like, that's insane. Mm-hmm. I've done multiple seminars all over the world. I've spoken at big trade shows. I've won cocktail competitions. I've done national finals. I've opened 13 venues. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I have done enough. But then I still go, okay, well, I haven't really. So I think with hospitality, especially being back here, it's kind of a breath of fresh air for me, and it invigorates me that while my whole week is really, really planned, I know that when I step in here at 3 o'clock on a Friday when I'm about to start my shift, or 2:30 on a Friday when I'm about to start my shift. From that point on, nothing is planned. Everything is intangible. Everything is pivot and move forward, pivot and move forward.
There's a beauty to that.
And it is. It's kind of like a ballet or a really good football game. You know, like you sit in the locker room and you're like the X's and the O's and the movements and all that sort of stuff. But then when you get on the field, everything can change. And I think that a little bit has revitalized me over the last couple of weeks, is that while it's exhausting and tiring to do 120 hours a week, it's that everything's planned, but then 3:00 on Friday, absolutely everything I can plan is done. And from that point on, I'm at the will of how many people we have come in, kegs blowing.
So is that time off in a way, almost on some level?
I think there's always a purity for me for bartending.
Yeah.
It's not robotic in a bad way, but it's so subconscious now. Like me pouring, me stirring, me shaking and stirring is just a movement that my body just gets into and jigs. And it is like my brain might be still firing, but my whole body just takes over. Like, it's funny because a couple of the guys, I don't really eat on shift, but I never like have breaks to go to the washroom or anything on the shift. My body just shuts down to a point there. It's just like, hey, you've got a job to do for the next 8 hours. Just get it done. Like, there's no washroom breaks. There's no sitting down. You're going to do 8 to 10 hours on your feet, and you're just going to, it just takes over. So I think there's a purity for me in bartending. Like, there's always times, especially coming back here, I was like, oh, do I really want to go back to bartending? Like, I've been working so hard lately to try and get away from the cocktail guy sort of like, the cocktail guy sort of mentality. I was like, do I want to go back? But I'm like, but it's a really good home base to have. I can do a lot of cool stuff there. I can become a practitioner and show people what I do for the social media marketing and stuff like that. I was like, but bartending, which long-term it's not going to happen. Like, long-term, I'm going to have a team here once we go 7 days, and I won't work the bar very often. Maybe 1 shift a week, 2 shifts every 2 weeks sort of thing.
And how often are you here right now?
I'm definitely here Friday, Saturdays every week.
Okay.
So, but then I come in and do menus for the guys, and tomorrow night I'm supporting the guys because I'm short staffed, so I'll work support for the guys tomorrow night. But there's a certain level of just purity in doing what you like doing. You know, it's like I think it is like an athlete becoming like a GM of the sports team or something. Mm-hmm. There's just something about going down on the field and throwing the ball, or like taking a tackle, or just playing around like that. I think there's a certain level of just it's like meditation. Like, there's no worrying about clients, there's no worrying about partners, there's no worrying about projects. It's just cocktails, and there's a little bit of labor in doing the financial side of things, but it's just cocktails and making great cocktails, making sure that garnish is on point, doing it as quickly and cleanly as possible, supporting your team, like building your team up and getting them excited, enthusiastic about it. So yeah, I think bartending as a whole, but I feel the same way when I serve. Like, when I was general manager and I served, it's just something. I love going in the dish pit too. Like, I love doing dishes. People think I'm mental, but like,
you love the process straight up.
There's nothing better than like just stepping off the floor, taking your tie off, and doing dishes for an hour and a half, and it's just this beautiful place where you just do it. Like, you have a goal, you have a job, you do it, you put in the dishwasher, you pull it out, the goal is there. It's quick gratification. It's just It is like a drug.
And what are you thinking about when you're doing dishes?
Nothing.
Okay.
Like, nothing. I'm not like planning something else or anything like that. I'm not thinking about anything.
So is it almost like a meditation on some level?
Yeah. I started off in the dish pit when I was a kid. So I started off in the dish. I wasn't a bartender for about 12 to 18 months when I got in the industry. I started off doing dishes 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning in a restaurant, a buffet restaurant of all that. So there's just tons of dishes. And there's just some gratification about cleaning that dish pit out, getting all those dishes done. More dishes come in, so it's another tackle job. So I think it's just a short-term gratification on applying that to long-term gratification that I get now. Like, patio took a month. There's a lot of steps to get to that patio. The patio was up. I came in early. I set it up, got the guys ready to go, and the gratification's there.
I know. I love the fact you did that time lapse video that day of setting up the whole thing being done.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. So you started off as a dishwasher. How did you just take it because it was a job, you were young, or how did that all work that you getting into the industry?
So I think it was on my 17th or 18th birthday on Christmas Day. My father and I had a massive falling out and I punched him.
Oh, that's not good.
And so he kicked me out of home. So I got kicked out of the home, like $500 in my pocket, packed up all my stuff, and drove me about an hour and a half into the city, because I grew up in the country, and dropped me off at a friend's house, and basically let me fend for myself. Lucky enough, I had good friends. I slept on the couch for a couple of weeks, started looking for jobs. And with my landscaping background, I got a job as a handyman, junior handyman at a little 3-star hotel off a big park in Brisbane. And so I started being the junior handyman. So the main handyman would come in about 9 o'clock. I was supposed to be there at 7. I'd be like changing light bulbs and cleaning windows and helping the housekeeping staff take out linens and stuff like that. Never been in hospitality. My mother was a horrible cook. Like just it's a typical horrible like cook, like family of 6, all 18 months apart. So 5 boys, 1 girl. There was like always 3 of us going through puberty. One was ending, one was starting, one was in the middle. And so the amount of food that my house would go through was just ridiculous. So mum would literally cook 2 or 3 kilos of potatoes and just mash them up in the pot, little smidge of butter, no salt. We didn't have salt and pepper in the house, and literally just mash them up and on the table. And so you scoop out like prison rules, elbows on the table. So I'd never been exposed to restaurants, being in a small town. My graduating high school class was like 62 people.
Oh, wow.
So small town, no restaurants anywhere for like 10, 15 kilometers. And so started working in this hotel, and maintenance and housekeeping and all that sort of stuff as like a 17, 18-year-old kid. And one night, one of the guys was like, "Hey, do you have black and whites? We're short-staffed." I'm like, "Yeah, I have my black and whites, but I wear to interviews and stuff." And they're like, "Cool, go home, get them, come back for 7 o'clock." So I came back and bartended and served a wedding. And then that was pretty much it. That was the bug. Like, I started bartending upstairs in the bar in the restaurant and doing breakfast service outside the kitchen and helping with that, and really sort of delved in. I was super young then. I remember the first time someone asked me for a martini, and it was like, "Yeah, I'm out," and literally walked out the bar with my hands up and let the other bartender make the martini, because I was just like, I don't even want to tackle this sucker. I don't know what a martini is. I have no idea. Then I started like really delving in, and so over a space,
you knew at that point that it was something that you were pretty passionate about.
I think it was something that was outside the norm. Like working in landscaping for 2 years, like you're eating McDonald's and drinking like 2-liter Cokes and 42-degree heat and grinding out like yard after yard after yard. And me and my brothers became very well known in the suburbs of being super fast sod layers. Like most teams could do like 50 square meters an hour, and we would get up to 75 to 100 square meters an hour. So we were like,
wow,
we could do a full size like suburban yard in a space before lunch, basically. And so it was that hard grind. And then I sort of saw hospitality as a sort of glamorous like life change. And so I started delving into it. And back then, like we're talking 1997, 98, there was no internet. Like there was no smartphones. Like if you wanted to learn about cocktails, there wasn't even bar courses. Like you would have to go and like go to bookstores and buy books and take them home and read them and write them. And so by the time I was 2021, I went for my first state title at a cocktail competition and won. And so I won a state title for a cocktail competition, and I'll have to send some photos through, because there are photos floating around of that photo shoot after I won that. And I was like 150 pounds and 6'2". I was very skinny, but and then that sort of just fed it. And back in the day, I used to be really upset that I jump around from job to job. But now looking back, like I literally would get a job as a bartender or a supervisor or a server or whatever. I would literally just suck that job dry of everything I could learn, and then be like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to move on. And from 21 to 25, I worked number of places, from nightclubs to silver service, serving like the Premier of Queensland and all this sort of crazy stuff. And I'd go from silver service lunch service in a dining hall to a nightclub, to finishing up at the nightclub and going upstairs to the cocktail bar and finishing the cocktail bar off till 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I got a job at a really good high-end cocktail bar, and that's when it really started like ticking with me. But with everything that's gone on, I think I grew up here in Canada, more so when I came here when I was 26. And so that was the big transformation. I don't think I'd be where I am in my career without coming to Canada, if that makes sense.
And where did you come to in Canada?
Victoria.
Oh, you did?
Never lived anywhere else.
And so why did you come to Victoria?
A girl.
Okay.
Not my wife.
Well, it's you're lucky, I guess, that you got led to Victoria, because I think Victoria is amazing.
It was, and that's the thing is, like, I fell in love with Victoria really hard. Like, it reminded me a lot of Brisbane, but I came and I started exploring myself a lot on a personal level, and I was 25, 26 when I came, like 26 when I came. So I fell in love with Victoria. I broke up with the girl very quickly afterwards, but I was like, oh, this has got something special about Victoria. And again, there was no cocktail scene. Like, I came from being named one of the best bartenders in Australia before I left to being a nobody, a nothing. And so I got into my wine. I worked at Moxie's not knowing what a franchise was at all. We don't have franchises like Moxie's in Australia. We don't have Cactus Clubs or anything like that. And then I started getting back in my cocktails when Solomon's opened, and that's what sort of sparked it all back up. I did a cocktail competition in New York. I had a magazine in New York for a little while there in the 29s, 2010s as well. So I had a magazine that I was writing for in New York at that time too, which is all cocktail related. So it was like I was living outside the culture here in Victoria. Mm-hmm. And then Solomon's open, and I'm like, oh, I've got a brethren. Like, I got someone who I can actually like talk to. This is awesome. We can actually chat about cocktails. And I remember Solomon always loved this story too. But I remember the first night Solomon's opened, me and Jill went down. People always find it weird that I call her my wife or the wife, but it's a capital T and a capital W is for the wife. She's like, it's capitalized. So me and Jill went down. We weren't married at the time. And I ordered a gimlet. And me and Solomon got into a Barney. Like a Barney.
What's a Barney?
A fight, like a verbal, like not like a big fight, but like a verbal altercation.
Okay.
On how to make a gimlet.
I see. Because
he was super old school. Like he was trying to do a certain style of cocktail, and I like my gimlets with roses, lime cordial. I'm ghetto when I'm super ghetto with my gimlets. And traditionally it would have been made with lime cordial. The lime cordial's changed over the years. So roses was created to fight scurvy on British ships. It would have had a higher level of sulfuric acid or sulfur in it, so it would have been a bit punchier. But you would be 2 ounces of gin. I think a lot of the times right then and there, everybody was going like sugar syrup and fresh lime juice. I'm like, I don't want that. I want my ghetto gimlet. And we had a big verbal, which me and Sol have had multiple verbal altercations over the years. Never that we like don't talk to each other afterwards, but we always have these fights that people walk away from, whether it be ice dilution and size or how to make a simple syrup, all these things. We have these massive disagreements because we're both very passionate. So I ordered a gimlet, and that was the time that I was like, Victoria's ready for this. You know, like I looked around and I saw people. Art of the Cocktail started that year. Art of the Cocktail started that year for the very first time. And I was like, maybe the last 3 years of me being in Victoria have sort of, Victoria's caught up. Vancouver was pretty behind as well, but caught up to where we were in Australia. And so that's when I started really getting back into like, okay, well, cocktails are going to be big in Victoria. It's coming.
Well, it's like speaking about Brad at Olo when he had Ula.
Yep.
And he had to redo it because Victoria wasn't ready for that.
And I think Victoria's always one of those cities that I laugh when people always post like, oh, there's nowhere to have good lunch in Victoria. I'm like, okay, you open for lunch and then no one comes.
Yeah.
Like everybody always complains about lunch until you actually open for lunch, and then it's like, oh, there's no good place to have brunch. Okay, I'll open for brunch. No one comes. So I think everybody like Brad at Ulo for sure. Like Ulo was always way ahead of its time, but it catered to a very specific style of clientele that had traveled the world and seen places in New York, seen places in San Francisco, and gone, oh, this is what dining is really about.
It was getting a promotion, or it was getting like recognized in like New York and San Francisco, and in Victoria, like it was like didn't work.
Exactly. You know, it's the same thing with Clive's back in 2011, 2012. Like people like New York knew about us, San Francisco knew about us, London knew about us, but in Victoria, people were like, why do you do cocktails like this? Why is it in a tiny glass? Why can't I get a cosmopolitan? And so I think when you're trying to push being ahead of the curve, it's always one of those things you just got to grit your teeth sometimes and go, you know what? I believe in my vision. I believe in what I'm going to do, and I'm going to believe that I'm going to follow through with it. Where
would you say the state of cocktails are now in Victoria, and where are they going?
I think I'm happy with the direction of where cocktails are going. We've talked about Veneto, and the loss of Veneto, I think, is a huge thing for Victoria. I think people underestimate just the impact of what Veneto as a venue has done. But on the flip side, what Mikey and Anton have done over at Nubo really shows that it's about the people that can make a venue, like make or break a venue, really. So I think we're in a good direction. I think there's still certain things that I look at and I'm like, okay, well, we've plateaued to a degree, but I'm hoping that some of the youngsters gain some rope. Like I looked at the new cocktail menu at Nubo, really fantastic menu, like really good menu is coming out very shortly. I'm really hopeful for that.
Yeah, I was sitting with them. I stopped by randomly and they're sitting outside on the patio.
Yeah.
And they were going back and forth about it because they both have strong opinions.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love just sitting there and hear them just go over everything.
I think for cocktail culture in Victoria, I want to see more venues and more operators and owners give some of these kids some more leeway. Like it is scary as an operator and owner. I get it. Like doing weird cocktails and doing like infusions and stuff like this. It is precarious. But at the end of the day, a lot of these kids are very talented and they either know already or they reach out to their mentors to teach them new things like costings and seeing how things are going to flow and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it is a lot of kids. There's a big gap. There's me and Solomon at the very, like the older guys. Nate and Kyle from Nibble Bar Company, they sort of sit in the middle. They're not young, they're not old, but there's a smaller portion of that. And then you've got this massive swath and this big age gap between Solomon and I to these youngsters, like 25, 26 years old. Me and Solomon going on 40. So there's this big gap. And so a lot of these kids don't have the capital or budget to open up their own place and express themselves. So it really comes down to these operators putting faith in them and giving them some patience and some time to really evolve. And I think Ine and Nubo have done that absolutely fantastically because it is scary as hell as a new operator going, here you go. We need all these.
Shawn there, I mean, he's doing a lot because he's got 4 places now.
Exactly. So like it's a big move to like put your faith in a 26-year-old kid to bring out a great cocktail menu and then hire all his buddies basically, even though they're super talented, but like really hiring a great team. So they've done a really great job on that. So you just need that like that little bit of leeway and that little bit of rope and all of a sudden you really can win in it. But it does take a lot. Like I remind the kids that I had to do it here. Like there was a petition out when I first took over this place for me to get fired because I stopped playing sports.
Oh, really?
Yes, from guests and staff. So like that was a really awkward conversation to have with the old food and beverage director that I had calls made for my expulsion from Clive's because I wanted to change things too much. But then bit by bit, we started making more money. And we started getting busier. We started getting recognition. We started getting press. And all of a sudden, the snowball starts happening. They're like, oh, you're not as eccentric and crazy as we thought you were.
I guess you just can't push it too hard at the start.
It goes back to the boiling frog theory. Like, if you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, it'll jump out. But if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and put it on heat, it'll just sit there and let it simmer until it dies. Which obviously the result is not death, but it's that sort of adaptation bit by bit by bit. And there's a lot of conversations you have where you're like, I understand that this is really ostentatious and crazy, but trust me, it's going to work.
Transparency is great.
You have to be transparent.
Yeah.
If
you want people to trust you.
Yep. You have to have transparency. You need to be open lines of communication. I don't have a stomach ulcer anymore because I'm transparent as hell.
I love it. Dude, do you have an influence in how you operate just in general?
From
Someone
outside influences?
could be anybody.
Well, we've talked about Gary Vee. Like, I discovered Gary Vee a couple of years ago. Like, it pushed me to go back to school. I went back to school a couple of years ago. I haven't finished off my diploma, but my advanced diploma, because of my trip to Singapore last year. But I went back to school. I did my advanced diploma in tourism and hospitality management. A lot of the courses were super easy and I breezed through them. But then I did HR and strategic financial planning, and which have really added to myself. And I think outside influences are Gary Vee. I haven't had a lot of other outside influences. Like, I'm not a big podcast listener outside of Gary Vee.
Yeah, Gary Vee is incredible, by the way. If no one's seen him, Gary Vaynerchuk, you need to go check him out.
And I've had a lot of people like do the usual, like, oh, well, he got given money by his dad and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, I align myself pretty hard with him being an entrepreneur and doing things like taking this place from zero to Clive's, and helping my family's business and all these sort of things. So it's always been difficult, I think, for me a little bit to a degree, is that I've never really had a mentor per se, because like when I was in the industry in Australia, there wasn't a lot of older mentors. Like, we were all sort of just scrambling to try and figure this out ourselves. I would say that someone like Gary Reagan, Philip Duff have been big influences on my career. Solomon at Pagliacci's has always been a massive influence for me. Like, we had a good relationship, but then when everything happened at Little Jumbo, he stepped up in a way a friend probably went above and beyond. And so me and Sol are always going to be probably really close. And we've done seminars all over the world. We've had great trips and we've had great stories and fun and stuff like that. But for me, it's always about waking up the next morning and hoping to be better than I was the day before. So, and it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, but
that's how I operate. I honestly think the fact, like, right now I'm perfect for who I need to be right now, like today. But if I was the exact same person a year from now, then I wouldn't be adequate for a year from now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm perfect for today.
Yeah.
Like, I keep pushing it. But I guess for me, I don't feel it as pressure. I get excited by it and I enjoy the change, and being able to reflect back on the way of, like, maybe I'll do something and it'll click in my head that I would have not have done that thing that way previously.
100%.
And that's like this dopamine hit when I realized that I just like leveled up.
Just gain that. Just give it to me. Just give it to me.
Oh, I love it.
But no, I agree with you. It's one of those things. Is like, I think that I look back and I even look back at the breakup at Little Jumbo, and I'm like, I could have dealt with that way better. Like, I could have seen that happening and could have been a better person for that. But on the flip side, like, it's taken me a long time, and apart from my wife would love me to go to therapy, but I don't do therapy. But it's been one of those things that if you don't learn from the mistakes you've made, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes.
100%.
And it's a ton of pressure to put on yourself to be better than the day before. But on the flip side, why would you not want to be better than the day before? You could die tomorrow. Like, why would you want to keep just along? Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, being better, and it's not about money. It's never been about money for me. It's always been chasing that happiness. Like, I'm happy most days of the week, unless I'm stressful, but like that happiness, that
I try to shoot for like 80-20
that,
or 90-10.
That's a good shot. That's a good shoot. I like that.
Make it like 80%. Like I'm great.
Yep.
20%. Life's not perfect. You know,
like it's going to happen. But I think waking up, I think everybody needs that a little bit more in their life. Like, you could literally die tomorrow, like literally die. And I'm like, well, what do you want to achieve in your life? Like, waiting for it to happen to you is not going to happen. Like, again, it goes back to me moving 14 schools or my fallout with Little Jumbo or anything like that. You're going to have to bounce back. And I think that's why I don't take more uncalculated risks. I take more calculated risks now because I know personally I can bounce back from more than I used to be able to. You know, like the loss of Little Jumbo almost like ended me. And that was a really tough like year period. And there's still a little like niggling in the back of my head just that I could have done better. But you could be done tomorrow. There's no second round. It's it. Like, so wake up and just go, you know what? I fucking shat the bed yesterday. I'm not going to do that today.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think, like, for me personally, I'm so busy that if I do mess something up or whatever, I absolutely try to learn from it, but I can't dwell on it because I don't have time.
Exactly.
You just have to plow ahead and acknowledge the fact that happened, but now you're better for it. And it's a gift in a way, an opportunity to learn.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
100% agree. Like I look back at all the mistakes and mistakes or screw ups or whatever. And I look back and I'm like, I'm lucky that I've got my wife, who is just, again, the most supporting woman in the world. But to keep moving forward, you just got to have to, like, because people's opinions of you I can't change what you do, nothing like that. It has to just keep going forward. Like, you have to have a high enough opinion of yourself to keep pushing through it, because people are going to say shit. People are going to talk behind your back. People are going to have opinions of you. But everybody you meet in the street has a different opinion of you. They have a different perception of you, and their perception doesn't define who you are.
No, and I mean, Gary Vee talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
Where you can't take that on at all, because it makes no logical sense, really.
Not at all.
Where is Shawn Soole in 5 to 10 years, do you think? Or where do you hope to be? What does the future look like for you?
I think I plan little things in the future, but I don't think I have an end game.
I think that's kind of healthy, I think.
To be honest, I have little goals that I'd like to get on a personal and a business level. Like, I'd love to see, because all my companies are very hospitality centric, I'd love to really see my media company really make a difference in the way that distilleries in BC and wineries in the province make changes to their online, like, platforms and presentations and stuff. My branding guy is a super talented guy. I'd love to see at least one. I think in the next couple of years, I probably will try and take all the things that I'm working on right now and invest in a brand, like a distillery or a small BC distillery, and apply all the things that I'm working on: branding, design, logo work, social media marketing, online.
So you're building
presence.
the machine that you'll be able to apply to something.
Yeah, I know it's very Gary Vee, but it's
a great methodology.
I want to apply all the things that I'm working on to a brand so that I can be a practitioner of it and sort of show people, like, listen, like, you guys said no, you called me the cocktail guy, you said I couldn't do this. Here's the brand that I helped build and just sold for X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to spend a bit more time with my family than I do now, which I think is, people wonder. Sometimes I think people don't believe my family exists because of what I do. I think it was only a couple of years ago that people were like, "Oh, you have a kid?" I'm like, "Yes." "You're actually married still?" I'm like, "Yes." I think there's a couple of personal things. I like to go on a vacation once a year. Is one to keep my wife happy.
First spot you'd want to go to?
I'd like to take her to Europe. I'd like to take her to France. I'd like to take her to Italy. I like her to experience food and stuff the way that I do. Because I have certain rules when I go on bar crawls in cities, that it's one drink, one bite to eat at each bar. And so she sees all my credit card pop-ups on her phone alerts. And she's like, "Dude, you fit 8 bars in 5 hours." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." But sometimes I'm only in town for like 24 hours, 48 hours. So I got to try and maximize my time. So if the next bar I'm going to is less than 20-minute walk, I'll walk it. Yeah. Like half an hour is a little bit too long, but anything like 20 minutes and under, I will walk to the next bar, do the same thing. So I've hit like 10 to 12 places in a night from 3 o'clock till midnight in some cities. I'd like to do that for them because I'm getting older. Like, I'm turning 40 this year, and my daughter's turning 10. And so I'd like to get her to experience some of the things that I never got to experience as a kid, but now I have the luxury to do so. And I have a fetish for cars. So I have a bit of a thing for cars. So if I ever do make a couple of $1 million, my wife is in so much trouble when it comes to my garage sort of situation.
How much space do you have right now?
Not enough for what I want. So,
okay.
So, yeah, I'd like to get a car that's sort of, that's one of those things. It's like the cigar and the whiskey on the back porch, like that Sunday drive by yourself, listening to music, top down, burling down Dallas Road when the road works aren't horrible and bang up my suspension, but like bang down whole thing is just a personal thing because I do a lot of stuff for whether it be the industry or the family or my partners. So I like those little things. But I don't think I have an end game because I thought about it. I was listening to a podcast from Gary Vee the other day, and he obviously talks about the Jets.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's this big thing. I just don't think I have a big thing. Like I'd like to keep working for a long time. Like I'd love to my legacy to be 85% of the bartenders in Victoria to be trained by me in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
You know, multiple distilleries and wineries and breweries and stuff have branding packages from my team or media done by my guys. So like, I think it is very cliche and very, I know Gary Vee, because we're both big listeners, like it's all about that process and not necessarily the result. I think that's just it. It's like, I think legacy is my thing right now. The next 20 years, like I've still got at least 20 to 30 years in me, whether it be working behind the bar or otherwise, to build something that when I pass away in 40 years, that people go, you know what, we wouldn't have cocktail culture in Victoria if it wasn't for him. You know, we wouldn't have cocktail culture in the Pacific Northwest because of what Shawn pulled off. So I think legacy is my end game.
That's kind of like for me too. I've been thinking a lot and just role playing the fact that like we're not around forever.
No.
So and a lot of people unfortunately get forgotten in time. And yeah, that's something like that's probably one of the reasons why I'm doing these podcasts a little bit, is to try and do as big of an impact as I can locally and help as many people as I can.
Well, because it's not like notebooks anymore. Like back in the day, you would write down notes and you would take notes about who you met and that sort of thing. Yeah. And those notebooks would just disappear over time. You know, this is on the internet forever.
Exactly.
Like this is not going anywhere.
And I've thought about that too, that these will live forever.
Yeah.
And these people everyone that I'm talking to and all these personalities, these unique personalities will be documented. And just all the amazing people in the city and just what everyone's doing. It's incredible. You know,
like my daughter's starting to wrap her head around it now because she likes to make fun of me because there's a couple of times she sent me a little thing. But the other day we're walking down to have breakfast and a car drive past. I was like, hey, Shawn Soole. And she's like, who is that, Daddy? I'm like, oh, it's just a bartender. He's like, but why is he saying hello to you? Like in the street like that? And I'm like, because that's how Daddy is. And then the other night, though, it was weird. Someone paid $10 for my signature here.
Really?
Yes. Which I found very, very odd.
Did they want to give you $10?
Yeah.
They're like,
well, because the servers did it all and they thought it was hilarious. And the girl that was with him was just like, we'll pay you $10 to get a signature. And they're like, okay. And so they came on, like, I found out about it after he left. I'm like, I wouldn't have fucking charged him, guys. Like, I would just give him my freaking signature. All the staff were just like, why does he want your signature? And my daughter's like, what? I'm like, you've never listened to, like, you on YouTube all the time. You've never listened to, like, watched one of Daddy's videos? She's like, no, they're boring. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's like cocktails, people, bartenders, me, my shoes. Like, that's what your Instagram's about. She's got a little Instagram account. And so she's trying to wrap her head around the fact that she's like, but why do people want your signature? I'm like, well, because I wrote some books. She's like, ooh, you wrote 2 books. Ooh, look at me. I'm Shawn Soole.
That's hilarious, dude. And would you say there's a number one lesson you've learned through being in the industry over all the years?
This one's going to be hard for people to swallow because I don't think they believe I have it, but humility. I think really truly understanding that you fucked up or like you made a mistake. And it goes back to little micro things like that bad Yelp review, like that sort of thing just gut you. And like you might have had a busy night, been like jammed packed full of things, and someone came up to the bar and asked for a certain cocktail and you like snapped them or something like that. But again, it comes back to like, I'm extremely humble and grateful for everything that's been given to me over the last decade. You know, like I've been lucky and fortunate, and luck has a lot to do with it, but it is also a ton of work and sacrifice. So I think you gotta have that humility, and I think people don't think I have it per se because of my persona, my Hulk persona. Like they're like, oh, you're just an egotistical, arrogant Australian. I'm like, well, there's been a lot of sacrifice and work behind that bravado that comes with understanding that you've got to also be humble. You know, like leaving here, which was to a lot of people a very sweet gig, to open up Little Jumbo was a huge risk. And I know a lot of people, when I left, like unceremoniously left Little Jumbo, that was like a huge, like, win for most people because they were like, oh, well, he tried his hardest and completely ballsed it up. So I think humility and gratitude is always something because like you said, doing a podcast, that's awesome. Is anyone listening? So you got to be humble, like you got to be grateful and humble for absolutely every single listen of every single episode.
You have no idea. I literally was like, I was going to be stoked if like 20 people listened to the episodes, and it's been way more than that. And it's giving me chills right now. Yep. Like I want to thank everyone that's listening, like from the bottom of my heart. Like it means more than I can ever express in words. And
you have people go, oh, you're doing it for ego, or like who's listening? Like, there's always someone out there. Like I'll put out an episode. Like I put out the work-life balance episode today. Someone on LinkedIn was like, thank you so much for this. It's really meant a lot to me. Like we can't keep putting pressure on our staff to work like we do. Like everybody's different. And it's always those weird little messages. Like that random kid in Australia that was like, I just listened to this episode, been going through a really rough patch. Like it's really nice to hear that you have the same problems that I have, even in the position that you're in when it comes to mental health and stuff. So I think that those little grateful moments and those little humble moments that like you can do all this and it could mean diddly squat, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to mean something to someone. So I think humility in all of it, like I know that some of my cocktails are ostentatious. So I've become more consumer centric over the last couple of years. So humility is the one thing.
Dude, I love it. We're almost at 3 hours.
Seriously?
Yeah. Oh yeah. This has been the longest one by far. It's been amazing.
It feels like it's gone forever.
Dude, so if people want to find out more, you're probably going to have the best, like this, you just go. It's not you just go. Tell people where they need to go.
So Instagram, you can follow me on at Shawn Soole on Instagram or at Soole Hospitality Concepts. I think it's the whole word, Soole Hospitality Concepts. It's funny that I'm the only, if you Google Shawn Soole, my spelling, there's only me.
Oh, it makes it easy.
There is no other Shawn Soole with my spelling in the world, which is really, really weird.
Amazing.
It's creepy as hell. Although there is a Shawn Soole spelled SEAN in Australia, and he's a hospitality consultant.
Oh.
I shit you not. Creepy as hell.
Really?
Yeah. We're not related.
If you spell it your way, though, you could put the Shawn Soole, literally.
No, I'm not going to do that. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter. Twitter, I'm Shawn Soole. You can go to SooleHospitality.com and find my podcast, Post Shift Podcast, or just look up on your local little podcast thing, Apple and Stitcher and Spotify and whatnot. BC Spirits is my passion project. You can find BC Spirits at BC Spirits on Instagram and bcspirits.com. All my companies, I'm not going to bother mentioning all those. That will be overkill. So, because I've got the Human Construct Branding and Design, Exemplar LM, Canadian Bar Store, BC Spirit Swag Store. I'm missing one. SHC.
Yeah, I was going to say. And if anyone's looking for what I'm doing, you can go to www.vicfoodguys.ca and you'll find these podcasts, or look up Vic Food Guys on Instagram. That's
Dude, this has been epic.
This has been great.
This has been...
like coming into this, I knew that like you do a lot, and I was saying that. I'm like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to try and get around all of this. I feel like this was like just an absolutely awesome...
This has been the best interview I've ever been given ever in my life.
Really?
I shit you not. Like we covered so much stuff. It's the best interview I've ever, like anyone's ever given me in my life.
Oh, no,
like
thank you for that
You went
feedback.
like this instead of people going like, again, cocktail guy, let's talk about your cocktail book.
No, we
went so broad, and it is by far the best. Like I've been waiting for someone, it sounds really egotistical, but I've been waiting for someone to interview me like what we just did.
I love it.
It's been epic.
Thank you very much, Shawn. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.